Hey everyone, welcome to the 368th episode of the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And we have, I'm going to be honest, it's kind of a depressing show for you today. We've got the whole kerfuffle around Insteon to talk about, including, well, not what happened because we still don't know, but what you can do. We also are going to be talking about sad news from LifeX. And I guess more positive news, we're going to be talking about how many smart homes there are in the US and Europe. Got, oh my gosh, a new device from Wise. And an update on the Helium network, both from the aggrandizement side, and Kevin now has a hub to talk about. Yeah. We're also going to hear from our sponsor, Impinj, and we have our guest this week is Erin Amy, the CEO of Brilliant, which is a smart home device that you can install in place of your light switches that controls a whole bunch of stuff in your house and acts kind of like a lovely tablet controller in your wall. So, we're going to talk about lots of things. But first, a message from another one of our sponsors. This week's sponsor is Influx Data. And increasingly, time series data is all around us. It's in the cloud as applications and services scale out. It's in the IoT as more and more devices come online, and sensor data is time series data. This is where Influx Db comes into play. Influx Db is the open source time series platform made for developers to build real-time applications quickly and at scale. It is programmable and performant with a common API that gives you high granularity, high scale, and high availability. Get started for free and learn more at www.influxdata.com. Okay, Kevin. Well, I'm just going to lay the groundwork. Here's the deal. Insteon. I'm just going to say it. A lot of our audience used Insteon.
Tries to use?
Yeah, even you, Kevin, had an Insteon system. This was back from like 2005. Insteon has been around doing their proprietary, they called it the proprietary dual mesh smart home system. You could do light switches. There were lamp modules. There were garage door openers. It was a full-on system.
And a hub. I had the hub in 2010, and it was a local hub because it was 2010, and it was rock solid, but you kind of needed to be like a server admin to use it at the time.
It got easier, but what has happened is Insteon users found out on Friday that their hub seemed to be down and they couldn't access the app. And they were like, hello? I got a bunch of emails. So I looked into it and sent out a bunch of emails. And on Saturday morning, I wrote basically that I don't think Insteon is coming back. And I don't know if we're ever going to get any real closure on this either. I'll be honest, because what has happened is, well, they haven't said anything. Insteon is part of a company called Smart Labs and an investment firm called Richmond Capital Partners, whose head of that firm was Rob Lilliness. They actually purchased the Insteon system and pulled it under the Smart Labs name in 2017. And Rob Lilliness actually used to be the CEO of Medio Systems. It was a cloud and predictive analytics company that ended up getting bought by Here. So it had the Nokia. He ended up working at Nokia. So I know Rob. I have been connected through him since he's had his Insteon buy. So I reached out to him on LinkedIn, and I didn't hear anything back on Saturday when I wrote this, but I did go through and I looked at all of the Insteon management team. And I discovered that none of the Insteon management team is apparently still affiliated with the company.
They disappeared.
There were 5 individuals that I tracked. Many of them actually stripped Insteon/Smart Labs from their profiles at all. Lilliness has since actually gone off LinkedIn. He is not available.
Probably because he's getting hammered with questions.
Yeah. To be fair, that's a reasonable thing to do. Smart home hubs should not just suddenly go offline. You could at least tell people that they're going to go offline. People are still going to be upset no matter what, but at least they would be upset and have information. I did hear back from Rob Lilliness, and I heard back from him Tuesday, and he says, quote, Unfortunately, I am not involved with the company. End quote.
I'd say that's actually fortunately for him.
Yeah, really. Now, when I sent him the message, I was like, hey, I'm trying to get in touch with you to figure out what happened with Smart Labs and Insteon. And that was the response. And to be fair, that is probably completely true. He stripped all of that from his company name. Other people associated with the company stripped their company stuff in April. So he may not be affiliated with the company. But I will say that it was probably, it could have gone through a receivership and we just don't know, like a quiet one. I have looked for bankruptcy filings. I have not found any bankruptcy filings, so they have not gone through a formal receivership or Chapter 7, Chapter 11 process. I've been part of a company that shut down kind of suddenly with no warning, and it's no fun.
Nope.
And sometimes it does happen. And if you're wondering, after this has gone down, what you're going to do, stay tuned for our IoT Podcast Hotline section, because Kevin is going to explain all that for you, because we figured that was probably the most obvious question to ask. But I do want to talk about the business of smart homes and these cloud-connected devices. And we've had a lot of experience with this. We've had, Insteon's not the first to go down. Earlier this month, actually, or maybe it was in March, iHome said they were shutting down.
My Vector robot.
Yeah, your Vector robot shut down. Juicero
died
shut down.
And was resurrected, luckily.
Oh, yeah. Revolve died. Everyone brings up Revolve or the Staples Connect or the Lowe's Connect hub. So this happens. And every time it does happen, everyone talks about some things like, how do we invest in stuff that is going to go down? What do we do with this? So the most popular thing that people always suggest when smart devices go down is, we should get a hold of the code. They should have put the code in escrow. And Kevin is going to tell you why that's an okay idea, but it's probably not going to work for most people.
I don't want to say that's what happened with Vector. And when Anki is the company that made the Vector robot that I bought, and many others bought it as well. But another company came in and bought the IP and got the code. And I presume not the servers themselves. They probably put the code on their own servers. But it didn't matter from an end user standpoint because all the little vectors that died, like I said, were resurrected. The company has actually turned it into a business where you can buy a lifetime subscription to Vector to get updates forever and cloud management and so on and so forth. It's a reasonable price. I think it's $149. I paid $79 for a subscription, and that also gave me a Vector recovery kit, so I can always go back to at least working firmware if something ever happens. I don't have to go to the cloud for it. I have my own ability to restore Vector and bring it back to life a third time. So that's not typically what happens. So I was very lucky in that regard. Putting code in escrow would be a great idea. I don't see too many companies do it that are in this industry. Can you actually think of any? I want to say there was one or two.
There are companies that have done it. I know that for a while, Particle, for example, which makes an IoT development board, they would put your code for your device in escrow for you to help kind of with longevity. And they would help establish a way to bring something back or at least carry it on for a little while. Now, I will also say, and there's tons of connected cooking devices that have actually put their code out there but haven't been able to swing it. Partially because the code isn't all you need. A lot of these, you still need some sort of cloud backing. Like even with Vector, you had to pay into a Kickstarter to get Vector resurrected. So one, it's not simple for normal users, but two, a lot of these devices will still have some sort of cloud component, and you've got to keep that up to date, which means somebody's time and resources. Even projects like the little printer, which people love people still try to resurrect those. They eventually disappear because you just can't pay for this. I don't know.
We actually talked about this or kind of alluded to this last week on the show when we talked about Pebble. There are still people in the community that have tried to keep the old original Pebbles alive. And that's the other thing. It's one thing to have code and escrow, but then you need people. Well, you need money, as you had said, for cloud services and
developer
effort, time.
Resources, yeah.
Right. But you also need a passionate community with people who are technically capable of keeping the product alive. So there's no guarantees on that. believe me, the Insteon community is passionate. And I see in the forums now, we should get the code. We should do this. Okay. It's one thing to say we should do this, but it's a completely different thing to actually do it. Right.
Right. And I'm not saying that, it can't be done. I'm just saying that it is a process. So it feels like everyone's like, oh, they should all put their code in escrow. And I originally thought that was a great idea and it should happen. And I think it's still a fine idea and can help, but I don't think it's like the solution. And the solution, honestly, with connected devices is you have to come up with a sustainable business model that supports developer time over a long period of time and security updates and cloud costs.
And that's why I didn't mind paying extra to have a device like Vector that I've already paid for come back to life, because I know what it takes to, set up cloud servers and manage the code and make updates and all that. Somebody's got to do that work, and they're not going to do it for free forever.
Right. I'm not trying to poop on everyone's parade. I just want them to know. And then the other thing, I always say this, I've written probably half a dozen stories talking about IoT companies going out of business. And some of the other things I recommend is, hey, when you're creating your company, think about what happens if it fails and how to manage that gracefully. So that might be something as simple as keeping 2 or 3 months operating capital in escrow to fund a graceful degradation, in the sense that you'll tell people, hey, in 3 months, this product's going to die. They're not going to be happy regardless, but at least they would have 3 months to plan. And
they would, I think, appreciate the fact that even if they may have to pay in the future for services to keep these things alive, at least the company had the foresight to put some money aside and give that buffer zone to get things worked out.
Exactly. And also, I think anytime you buy a connected product, I think it should come with some sort of guaranteed expiration date on it, that maybe it goes beyond that, but you're like, hey, we're going to support this through X number of years. And maybe you put that much money in escrow. I don't know. So there's a reason we're talking about this, because this is all going to become relevant again, possibly because the company behind LifeX bulbs put out a notice last week. This company's Buddy Technologies Limited, and they said, hey, we have contracted with FTI Consulting to try to find offers for a sale or recapitalization of the business. This is never a good sign. Basically, Buddy is saying, you know what? We can't operate this anymore. We're hiring someone. Maybe they can find someone to sell the business. The nice thing that Buddy did is they actually posted this online on the Buddy investor site. So we'll include a link to that. And basically, if you have LifeX bulbs, it is a question like, hey, what's going to happen here? We don't know. Someone might decide, hey, I'm going to buy the assets really cheap and keep it running. Someone may not do that, and then they'll end up filing for bankruptcy if they do an orderly proceeding. And the questions that we would have are, hey, how much money do you have left? How long can you support the servers? And we don't know that yet.
The interesting thing is I have experience writing some code that can control my LifeX bulb. I only have one. So I'm thinking, oh, geez, I could just, manage it myself with my code. I can create a little interface, etc. But then I realized I have an API key from LifeX.
Yes.
And it all goes to the LifeX cloud to say, yes, this person is a developer and can access this light bulb in however he or she wants. So really, that gained me nothing.
You have a light bulb that will turn on and off. That's what you have.
True.
A very expensive Wi-Fi light bulb. So,
with many colors that I can't change.
Yeah, I don't think you'll be able to change it because there's no hub. It's all Wi-Fi. So
I programmatically have changed it, but that's, again, if the servers are down, not going to help anybody.
If they give you the code, you could pull it into a Pi or some sort of device and then programmatically
my own LifeX server.
Yeah, basically you'd be running your own LifeX server.
And for only $99 a year, you too can be part of my server.
There you go. Kevin's next gig, supporting LifeX. I'm not dissing these companies. I just want people to understand that this is complicated and it's not going to get any easier. There is a glow on the horizon, and we talk about it a little bit actually in the interview with Aaron Amy. With Matter, what we can see, because there's going to be a universal communication protocol between devices, and that will be local, you could have, again, the basic functionality. So with like your LifeX bulb, Not that that would be Matter certified, because why would they do that in the middle of like running out of money? But it could say, here's how to turn a light bulb this color. Here's how to turn it on, off, dim it, etc. So those are all going to be basics that are going to be potentially accessible and locally controlled, which means you could get more functionality out of these devices. You won't get everything, but you could get a little bit more, anything that's part of the spec.
I'll just throw this out there only because I've looked at the GitHub repository for Matter, because all the code for Matter is available. While a developer might not individually want to go through a certification process, it is possible that you could write, like a Matter API for LifeX on your own and share it in a community and at least help some people. Maybe.
Yeah, no, it's possible. I mean, these are going to be kludgy. They're not going to be like for normals. So
correct. This will be community driven. It'll be somebody who has a LifeX bulb like me that says, I just want this to work with my other devices. I'm going to use the Matter spec, cobble something together, and hey, it works. And hey, everybody, if you want to do it, here's the code so you can do it too.
Exactly. All right. So here's a fun thing. We're talking about smart home systems going down, cloud connection. How many people might this affect? Holy cow, a lot. Berg Insights, which is a research firm, they count the number of smart homes running around out there. They estimate that there are 105 million homes in Europe and North America that were smart at the end of 2021. This is insane to me. That is a lot. So the research notes that there are 105 million smart homes. That's people with smart home stuff in them in Europe and North America. But there's also a total of 223.2 million smart home systems that were sold only in North America. That's not even Europe. So the systems are multiple things like Nest systems or, I guess, Amazon and Ring systems. And they estimated that 30 million of those systems were actually whole home systems. So a lot of those are still point solutions, but we're seeing a rise in the number of whole home systems being purchased. And that's pretty impressive. And I think that's partly because home builders are actually building this in. We're also seeing whole home systems become part of multifamily units. We talk about that in our interview. So there's a lot happening there. Europe's a little slower. They've only got 167.7 million smart home systems. They were up more, like more were bought over the last year, but that makes sense because you're coming from a lower base. And about 20 million of the European systems were multifunction or whole home systems. So again, seeing some movement there, and that's pretty good. But it also means there's going to be more and more people getting upset when stuff goes down.
Yep. That's why I say pick your platform first.
Yeah, and I would say local control and recognize that if it goes down, you're going to lose a lot of the cool functionality you had. I mean, I would say look for companies with expiration dates, but if you're going to install a bunch of like light switches, really even a 3 to 5 year expiration date, you're like, I don't want to switch out all my light switches in 5 years. That sucks. So
no, it adds up. It adds up when if you switch out all the light switches in your house, for example. That's a big investment of time and money, in my opinion.
It is. All right. Speaking of, I don't know, gadgets.
New devices.
New devices. Wyze has a new lock. It's the Wyze Lock Bolt. It's $80.
Bluetooth connected. It's got a keypad. It's got a fingerprint sensor. And you could buy it now on the cheap, save $10, except it's sold out.
Yeah, that makes sense. They worked with Lock-In, which is a Chinese company that makes smart locks for apartment buildings. The weird thing about this is actually Wyze usually just rebadges products from Chinese companies. And here they actually are working and doing the branding with the Chinese company. So I did think that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think they worked with Lock-In on their other lock as well. This is not the first collaboration. Interesting. I was wondering how they solved the batteries problem in the keypad. There's a USB port on the bottom of it outside your front door. Just plug it in and recharge after 12 months of battery use. I don't think that's the best solution, but hey.
Yeah, that's not ideal. I mean, physical access. I mean, I guess you could be like, is there one of the first Ring products, the Ring doorbell, the original one had a reset button right underneath outside. So
yeah, that anybody could just,
But that was when we were learning. Now we know. Okay.
Yes. Bluetooth, though, so no cloud connection, which is nice.
Right. Wise is really going all in on this Bluetooth connection. It does mean that you can't reset your lock code or open your lock from far away, though. But that's not something that everybody wants to do. I mean, my husband, we just bought a new lock, and he was just like, I really just want a keypad.
And in fact, I've created special access codes for my lock for the neighbors or a contractor, and I've done that remotely. But the fact of the matter is, if it's somebody I know, I can just say, here's my key code, because we only have one. We don't have one for each individual because the girls didn't want to be tracked opening and closing the front door.
Good for them.
For understandable reasons.
Good for them.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about LoRaWAN. Haha.
Oh, let's do that.
Okay. So some news here. Helium. We talk about Helium a lot. And Helium is a peer-to-peer distributed LoRaWAN network. And they've got multiple nodes and hotspots people set up. And in exchange for proof of coverage and setting up that network, people get Helium tokens, and then they can sell their Helium tokens for actual money. And there's a whole crypto market there. And if you're a company that needs access to a low power, wide area IoT network, you go and buy data credits on the Helium network, and you can use it to track whatever you want. Helium's done really well. Their network has expanded tremendously. And there's news this week that Senate, which is another company that provides a LoRaWAN network here in the US and other parts of the world, has now expanded their Helium integration. So now Senate devices can roam onto the Helium network everywhere. So anywhere, they had done a deal where it was just in the US, and now it's everywhere. So this is good news for two reasons. One, Senate actually has devices on their network. There's not a lot of devices on the Helium network that people can see, but Senate has devices. So if the Senate devices run out of Senate coverage, they can roam onto the Helium network, and voila. Then there's more devices, which helps make the Helium network a little bit more viable for people who are really excited about that model. So yay, that's a deal. And then let's talk about Helium.
Yeah, because I was really excited about that model 13, 14 months ago when I ordered my Nebra Helium Indoor Hotspot Miner. And I finally got it. So after, 14 months of whining, you'd think I'd be happy.
I did think you'd be happy.
And I was when I got it, but then I set it up. And the setup process was fine. Within 5 minutes, had it on the network, connected to my internet. It was syncing all the Helium blockchain data, which they say takes 24 to 48 hours. Took 28 hours. And then nothing happened. Nothing. And then another day or two went by because I'm like, I'll give it time. And nothing happened. So I reached out to Nebra, their support folks, and I explained what was going on. I gave them a diagnostic that I was able to pull over my home internet from the device, because at least that part was still working. And 2 days later, they're like, yeah, your setup is good, but your Wi-Fi and your Bluetooth are going to be flaky until you reflash the device. And I'm like, okay. So just a quick backstory. Because of the supply chain shortage, Nebra originally was using Raspberry Pis. They switched over to different board that is still Raspberry Pi-like and compatible. It's called the Rock Pi, and it's got a Rock chip in it as opposed to a Broadcom chip. And that was part of the delay. And I think they were trying to get these out the door so quick that there were definitely some flashing issues of the firmware. Mine had firmware from December. They sent me a link to very current firmware from April. It took me all of 5 minutes to put that firmware on an SD card, flash the device. And after that, it's been working, which is good. It's only been a day. I haven't received any Helium tokens for data or beacon awareness or anything like that, but at least it's working now. But just not a good look after waiting all that time that I had to manually flash it. And I'm not the only one. Based on forums, a lot of people who got this Rock Pi version had to do the same thing. So I'll probably stop whining about it now.
Maybe. Well, I mean, it is frustrating because there was gold in them thar hills for a little while.
Oh, yes. But if you look at the Helium Explorer map, when I looked at it 14 months ago, there wasn't a hex covered. They're like little claims of your plot, basically. I fired up the new Nebra and looked at my plot, and there's already a hotspot in the same hex, and there's green hexes taken all around me. So, yeah.
Sorry. But
that's all right.
Presumably you will set it up, it will work, and it will earn you tokens for now until eternity.
And to be honest, that's not the main reason I wanted it. I wanted to be part of what they call the People's Network and help build this broad, wide swath of LoRa spectrum out there for devices. So
you wanted to build an IoT network, which you still are.
I'll put that on my resume. Yeah.
There you go. I'm part of the People's Network. Okay. Well, I promised you that we would talk about what to do with your Insteon Hub. We're not going to take a voicemail this week for the Internet of Things podcast hotline, because I know the question that many of y'all will have. So it is what to do with my Insteon system. It has failed. But for next week and the further weeks, if you have a question, give us a call at 512-623-7424. And you'll be entered to win we'll call it a refurbished. It was a review unit of the Nest
Gently
doorbell.
Gently used. Nest
doorbell. I'm going to tell you, y'all should call in because we're not getting a lot of calls. And so,
That's because they're all working on their Insteon Hub hubs to get them working.
Your chances to win are really good. 512-623-7424. Now, here, I'll do it. Hi, Kevin and Stacy. I love the show. My concern is my Insteon Hub went down, and I don't know what to do. Can you help?
P.S. That Kevin is a real catch.
P.S. Kevin, you're so great.
Yes, we can help. So, first things first. If you have a current Insteon Hub, you may have thought about factory resetting it because you don't know what's going on. I would not do that because it's going to try and reconnect to Insteon servers and those aren't working. It might cause a problem. There is one way that we know of that can actually resolve that situation, and I'll get to that in our options because one of the options allows you to do that. So, first things first, you could actually just say, I'm done with Insteon, and you could replace your hardware. Replace it all. Pick another system and do that. And honestly, if you haven't spent hundreds or thousands of dollars, I'd probably do that, quite honestly. That's what I would do.
Just a few light switches or things like that?
Yeah. But if you've made the investment and you still want to continue down the Insteon path, there's actually a number of things that integrate with Insteon, either through plugins or some other software. We've covered a lot of them before as individual platforms, but I'm going to go over them real quick right now. You could get that old Universal Devices Insteon ISY99 server that I had. It's been updated since I got it in 2010, and that mostly relies on local control. So you could swap out your newer Insteon hub from a Universal Devices hub. It's $259. Again, anything that relies on the cloud may be an issue if it relies on Insteon's cloud, but at least locally you'd be all set. If you don't want to do that, we've talked about Home Assistant before. In fact, just last week we talked about it. You put it on a Raspberry Pi. It's free software. It's basically a little smart home hub of your own. It integrates with thousands of things, and one of those things is Insteon. So you can run through the Insteon integration setup and keep your Insteon devices up and running. You could do the same thing with Hoobs, which stands for Homebridge out of the box, but I will say that that's really meant for adding non-HomeKit devices to a HomeKit environment. One of those non-HomeKit devices would be Insteon. There is an Insteon integration. In fact, Hoobs is making a big deal out of it, saying, hey, if you lost your Insteon recently, your service, come here to Hoobs. So you could do that. You can download their software for a suggested $10 donation, put it on a Raspberry Pi, or you can buy a pre-installed Hoobs device itself for $229.99 and then pull in your Insteon stuff. You could also go with the self-hosted OpenHAB software, but you're going to need the current Insteon hub to integrate with that, or a legacy Insteon hub, or the Insteon PowerLink modem, because that's how it's going to make its integration point. So the benefit of OpenHAB, even though I think it's probably not as user-friendly, you can run it on a Pi, but you can run it on a Windows PC, Mac, Linux, or even on a Docker container. I would do that locally, not in the cloud. Otherwise, you're relying on the cloud again. HomeSeer is something we've talked about. HomeSeer makes a similar platform to the ones we just discussed. They sell hardware. They have a little hub with Z-Wave. It supports bunches of digital assistants and products. It's $139.99. You could always go that route. And they do have full details on their integration process available on their site, front and center right now, because they want to get your business. And then lastly, this is actually the cheapest option if you're buying a full-blown system, is the Habitat, which we looked at before a couple years back. It's gotten much better since we looked at it before. It has Zigbee, Z-Wave, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi inside. And even though there's not a native Habitat integration for Insteon, there is a community integration. And those tend to be pretty good. So it's an option, is what I'll say. It's $109.95 for that. So if you decided you don't want to stick with Insteon, honestly, I would go with a big brand platform such as HomeKit if you're into iOS, Google Home, Madame A, Samsung SmartThings. Samsung no longer makes their hardware, but AOTech sells a SmartThings compatible hub for $124.99. I hate to have people replace good hardware, but if it's not going to be supported, that is definitely something to consider.
That turns it into bad hardware.
Yeah.
Stay tuned, because in the next couple of weeks, I actually have the AOTech SmartThings hub. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to just set this up and see how it's working, how I'm going to set up a SmartThings system again in the interest of revisiting our past home hubs. Okay. Sorry, this was kind of a bummer. We've got a story up on the site that talks about all of these options, gives you links out to all of those platforms. So make use of that if you can.
There's over 100 comments on that post, so there's a lot of good information in there as well.
Yeah. Our audience is devastated, angry, and really helpful.
Understandably so.
Thanks, audience. All right. Well, that concludes the Internet of Things podcast hotline. If you'd like to give us a call, give us one at 512-623-7424. And now we'll move on to the next segment of our show, where we will talk to Aaron Amy, who is the CEO of Brilliant. We're going to be talking about Brilliant switch or pivot into multifamily and builders, not just DIYers. We're also going to be talking about its plans for Matter, and he even does talk a little bit about Insteon. So all of this and more await you. But first, a word from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Impinj. Hey everyone, we are taking a quick break from the Internet of Things podcast for a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Impinj, and I have Gayleen Meyer here with us today. So glad you're here, Gayleen, and tell me a little bit about Impinj and Rain RFID.
So some people define the Internet of Things as a network of powered electronic devices. Impinj expands the Internet of Things to include everything. We're talking about things like your suitcase that you check in at the airport, the new outfit you order online for in-store pickup, or pallets and packages moving through a supply chain. The Impinj platform lays a foundation for developing IoT solutions that connect physical items to the cloud. Using Rain RFID, the Impinj platform delivers the identity, location, and authenticity about everything a business needs to manage. Rain RFID is a global standard that provides a unique identifier for any item. It can identify up to 1,000 items simultaneously without line of sight. Impinj invents and builds Rain RFID products like the tiny chips that power a Rain RFID tag, readers that wirelessly identify tagged items, and software like algorithms and APIs used to build and operate Rain RFID solutions. The capabilities of Rain RFID combined with the low cost of tags make it the ideal technology for very large-scale IoT systems.
What types of IoT applications use Rain RFID?
Impinj works with a global ecosystem of partners who innovate and deploy IoT applications across a range of industries. One good example is the Delta Airlines bag tracking system. A Rain RFID tag is attached to a suitcase at check-in. Bags are tracked as they move through the airport sortation system, on and off airplanes, by Rain and RFID readers integrated in conveyors and equipment. The Delta app tells passengers that their bag's been loaded to the airplane. Because every bag is tracked as it moves, airlines can see where bags get stuck, where the system needs improvement, and how even things like staffing level impact system performance. When I think about very large-scale IoT systems, I think about the retail industry. Imagine an apparel retailer, take Zara for example, operating an IoT system that wirelessly identifies every single product inside their stores. Now zoom out and think about all the items in all the stores across the globe being digitally managed from manufacturing through the supply chain with inventory data that gives the retailer accurate data about products and their availability. This impacts all the ways that a retailer sells products to consumers, both in-store and online. For so many businesses, visibility into the supply chain is critical for their operations. In the past few years, we've seen weak supply chains exposed from the lack of inventory and limited visibility, hampering an organization's ability to operate. IoT systems are solving these challenges. Impinj enables tracking packages as they move through a supply chain where shipments are identified as they move on and off a truck or in and out of a warehouse. This gives businesses the visibility they need to operate with greater agility, anticipate supply chain issues so that they can fix them before they're compounded.
So, how would someone learn more about Impinj?
You can visit our website at www.impinj.com. That's IMPINJ. And then take a look at our blog. And there you'll find a lot of stories about how Impinj and our partners are connecting everything to the IoT.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is Aaron Amy, who is the CEO of Brilliant. Hello, Aaron. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thanks. I hope you're doing well as well.
I am so excited to talk to you. You have a light switch that has a screen. It is a new way of controlling a light switch. It also ties in with so many other products. But I'll let you explain to people what Brilliant is and what you were trying to do with this product when you launched it.
Thanks. Well, Brilliant is really the user experience for technology in the home. And it's a platform that connects and orchestrates all of the different smart home systems that you have and gives you touch access through a screen and voice access through voice assistants right from the walls of your house. So it's something that in a lot of ways provides the kind of capabilities that you might have had in the past from an ultra high-end home automation platform that would cost tens of thousands of dollars and very few homes ever had. But this makes it available to all homes at a consumer price point of, few $100s. And it's because of that being built into a lot of new homes and new smart apartments now as well.
Yes. And I would love to get your take on what you've learned having them out into the world about how consumers want to interact with their smart home.
Yeah, so we do integrate with pretty much all of the major smart home products that you might put into your home. The installation works just like a regular light switch. So if you can install a light switch, you can wire this up. It just uses a few wires, 2 screws, and then the configuration is just a matter of connecting it. In many cases, we can auto detect the devices that are on your network, and you can connect to them. If there are other Brilliant devices, we auto detect them as well. If there are other third-party devices, you can just say, "Oh, I have this and I have that," and so on. It connects with, for example, your video doorbells. If you have a Ring or you have a Nest Hello or what have you, if someone's at the door and they ring the doorbell, instead of only getting a notification if you have the app on your phone and you have the phone in your pocket and you have the ringer on, you get a notification right in the wall, and anyone who's there can have access to that, can see the person, can talk to them, and with a single tap can open up the door for them with a smart lock. We do have a very deep integration with Sonos, so you can see all of your favorites and playlists and play them on the from the walls of your home. You can even redefine the zones and so on the fly. Pretty much anything you can do from the Sonos app. You can control smart shades. You can obviously do climate control. Smart lighting is built into our product. We also have a line of products that's not the control, but the smart dimmer switches and smart plugs, and we provide home automation capabilities. So you can say, "I'm going to eat dinner," or "I'm going to bed," and the home will do all of the things that you would want it to do. And that's really something that, to get to your question about what we've learned over time, is just building up that ecosystem. It's constantly being responsive to the new categories of products and products that people want integrated. But the fundamental thing that we've learned is really a validation of the overall premise that we had, which is the biggest way that smart homes are broken today is that you have all of these different systems that are completely separate and don't talk to one another. And in terms of who can use them, it's just a person who's made the investment and built up the expertise to install a whole bunch of apps on their phone and learn how to use each and every one of them and so on. And honestly, that's not an investment that most people want to make. We all want the benefits of smart homes. And I think it's very evident that all homes are going to be smart in the future, but only a small minority of us are obsessed enough with it to want to learn the ins and outs of all these different apps and so on.
Okay. To be clear, though, someone still has to come in and program all this, correct?
Well, not really. If you look at a Control 4 system or a Crestron system or something like that, you need to have a highly trained person who's learned a programming language to go and do it. And anytime you add a new integration or you want to program a scene or something, you're actually going to have someone come out and charge you $300 an hour to do that. It's one of the reasons that model is not going to scale. Now, the integrators and contractors who work with it still play a very important role, and often the builders that we work with are relying on them to do the initial setup and install. But Brilliant is actually designed to be simple enough that consumers can do it themselves. So it is very much a DIY-able product. And that's why, we sell it direct to consumers on our website. We sell it through Amazon. We sell it through Home Depot and Best Buy. So we really have sort of a dual path there between the DIY and more of the direct consumer space, and then, utilizing our network of trained installers who are all very well educated on Brilliant and work with the builders and with the multifamily operators and so on to have smart homes in new construction.
So as a smart home owner, I bring this in, I set it up, I create my routines, my automations, whatever I want, and then other people can go and control them. That's great. When I've got a builder, so you're working with a Toll Brothers, a Lennar, somebody who's building these things into their homes, do they program them or do they just put them in there and it's a light switch with a little fancy tablet if you can use if you want?
So in general, it will be set up with whatever that ecosystem is of smart products that builder uses. So typically builders provide the things that are built into the home, and then they leave it to consumers to add things that might be more portable, plug-in kinds of things. So specifically, builders will typically have maybe a couple of Brilliant controls, maybe some Brilliant smart light switches, and then they'll have a smart lock, they'll have a smart thermostat, they'll have a smart doorbell. In multifamily, they often have leak detectors and things like this as well for loss prevention. But they won't put in a sound system or smart bulbs or other products that consumers can bring themselves. So it'll generally be pre-configured to work with whatever products the home or the apartment came with. But then you can bring your own devices and you can add on to it, and you can do that yourself. And that ability to add your own devices is actually quite unique in the multifamily space. Most smart apartment platforms don't allow you to bring your own devices and have them be a part of the experience as well. So part of what we do in that market is to provide this extensible platform where a tenant can have their own devices and craft their own experience on top of what's provided by the building owner or operator. But then when that tenant moves out, everything gets reset to its original configuration where it's just the devices that are provided by the landlord.
It would be interesting to know, and I don't know if you'll share this or even know this, but with your builder installs or even multifamily installs, what percentage of people do you think are adding their own stuff onto it and adding to the existing programming? How many are leveling up their smart home?
Yeah, I don't have the exact percentage at my fingertips, but it's fairly substantial. And there are two areas of customization that are probably the most prevalent. One is people setting up their own voice assistant built in. So we have Alexa built in, so you can actually just talk to Amazon from your walls if you want to. If you prefer not to be talking to Amazon, that's your option. And so they need to connect up their personal Amazon account for that to work. And then also we work with HomeKit, so you can use Siri. We work with Google Assistant, et cetera. So you can control Brilliant through those voice platforms as well. And so that's one category that's very, very common for customization. And then the other is bringing in the portable device. I think the most popular one in terms of the portable devices that people bring in is the Sonos, and Philips Hue is also quite popular. If you want to add smart lighting in some places, or have it work with colors and so on, that's another popular one.
So let's move forward and talk about Matter, because this is one of those things where it feels like it could really help your business. It could be very complementary, or it might make it ultimately less necessary. It's really hard to say. So where do you stand on Matter?
Yeah, I mean, I view Matter as a great opportunity for the industry to standardize many aspects of the connectivity layer of integrations. What Matter addresses is really just how do you talk to a device, and providing some a framework for standard functionality that should be available for every such device. Now, a lot of devices have their own capabilities that may not be encapsulated in the baseline profiles, but they'll be able to extend that. So that helps a company like Brilliant a great deal, because our value add is not primarily in the connectivity layer; it's in the user experience layer. We're trying to create a good user experience platform for orchestrating and controlling all of the technology in the home and just interacting with it and making that simple and easy. Matter is completely agnostic with respect to how the devices are controlled. It just gives you basically an API you can talk to that's standardized. So for us, it would make it easier to support every single device out there in this imaginary future where everyone has adopted it all, and have that be a very a much simpler matter, and let us do less work on the individual sort of wiring up of all the integrations and focus exclusively on the user experience of them. Now, as it is, to be honest, we spend 90% of our time in the integration on the user experience and 10% on the connectivity. So it doesn't suddenly solve the problem of everything that we're doing, but it does open up the door to just support more products more reliably. Right now, as I said, every company that we integrate with, we have a close business relationship with. We make sure that the integration is really, really high quality. If they're going and testing and certifying Matter compliance, then that should hopefully ease that process and make it easier to support new products.
We'll come back in like 2 or 3 years on the actual Matter. What did it do for us? What didn't it do? In the meantime, I will say that I have seen a shift from kind of us talking about interoperability and things like that in the smart home to services and pulling together clusters of devices maybe to create a security service is probably the most popular one that people will buy. Wellness is maybe another area that I think there's a lot of interest in. Y'all have done an agreement with Resideo, and I know they're a big proponent of the services platform. So how would a company like Brilliant adapt to this shift towards services?
Yeah. There are two areas in which we're now involved in IoT and smart home services. One of them is the partnership with Resideo on the security side, and then the other is in the multifamily space, where there's a SaaS platform for orchestrating and managing all of the technology at scale. Because when you have an apartment building with 500 apartments in it, you have a different kind of thing that you're doing than if you have a single family home that you need to manage. The first place I'll start is that baseline functionality needs to be available without a subscription. I think a lot of people got a little ahead of themselves and got convinced themselves that people are going to be subscribing to their light bulbs and so on. And I just don't think that that's a model that home owners, home residents, et cetera, are very interested in. So I think that it sort of has to pass the test of, are you really providing value for that subscription fee? Are you providing a service that provides ongoing value where it makes sense to pay for it? So, as an example, we have cameras and microphones and so on built into the Brilliant controls, and you can use those to do a video intercom around the house. You can use them as a baby cam. You can do remote video monitoring from our mobile apps, where you can look in on your home and so on. We don't charge for anything around that, but it's quite reasonable if there's a security service that leverages those video cameras and provides cloud storage of your video and gives you alerts when there's a potential issue. That's absolutely something it's reasonable to pay for, and people do pay for. The partnership with Resideo is actually quite deep. They've been a partner of ours right from launch, and we're just great to work with. And it started with thermostats, and then it expanded into leak detectors in multifamily. Now we integrate with pretty much their whole range of devices, which is really quite rich. You can look at your Resideo security cameras through the Brilliant controls. You can do all kinds of stuff, and really, most uniquely, we have a very deep integration into their security platform, where Brilliant's the only third-party panel where you can arm and disarm your Resideo security systems. For those who don't know, Resideo owns the Honeywell Home brands. And so You can arm and disarm and see your status and all the status of all your sensors and so on. And it's really a secondary control panel for the whole security system, as well as providing that unification between the worlds of security and smart home. And that's very interesting, both in terms of the value that it offers homeowners and so on, but also the opportunity to go to market together with them. And Resideo actually invested in us as well as partnership, and we raised around $40 million Series B last year. They were one of the participants in, which just kind of helps solidify the shared mission there. And then on the multifamily side, as I mentioned, if you've got 20,000 units under management, where it's a couple hundred or a few hundred people per building, you really need to have a technology management platform that simplifies things for you in a few different areas. Number one, there's the question of how do you get everything really quickly configured right from the start? Because if you're installing thousands of units, what you can do is you can actually just define, well, I have 3 different kinds of apartments that have these particular smart devices that go into them. And then for each apartment in the building, I just go, okay, unit 302 is a type 3 and unit 308 is a type 5. And then the installer will go in and just scan, say, okay, I'm in unit 301, and they'll scan some QR codes, and it can, auto configure everything for getting it set up easily. And then ongoing management, there's an asset protection kind of capability where it's monitoring climate to make sure that things aren't out of range, whether that's temperature or humidity. It's monitoring the leak detection to make sure that there isn't any water damage that's potentially happening, which is the single biggest security loss. In some cases, there can be a security monitor security tie in with Resideo, and then in turn management. You have something that's, again, different than a single family home because people move in and out of apartments a lot more often than they do homes. So you really need to simplify that process. And we tie into the property management systems that are used. We know when somebody is moving out. We know when a unit is vacant. We know when someone is touring the unit as a prospective tenant. And we know when somebody moves in. And all of these things have different actions that are associated with them. So there's sort of clearing out any kind of devices that they might have brought in or integrations they might have added to it. And then there's saving energy during the period of vacancy. And then when somebody moves in, there's provisioning everything and setting it up for the new tenant.
We'll talk about the subscription aspect in a moment, but really quickly on the multifamily, how do y'all handle the issue of privacy? A lot of apartments, they'll turn over the smart home system for the apartment when it gets leased. In this case, because you're handling things like leak detection and stuff, is it turned over to the resident, or is some of that data shared, or how do y'all kind of do that bifurcation?
Yeah, fundamentally, it's turned over to the resident for privacy reasons, and we're not sharing any kind of detailed information about what's going on in an apartment. And landlord certainly doesn't have access to microphones, cameras, anything else that you're naturally concerned about there. We do provide these sort of parameterized alerts where, if there's a leak that's detected, that's a maintenance issue that they have to know about. That's the whole reason that leak detector is there. And similarly, if if it's too humid or it's 95 degrees or, something is really anomalous where it's a sign that maybe they should fix something, then that's when we get into notifying the operators of the apartment building.
So final question, probably super relevant for a lot of people right now, which is the idea of business models. And you mentioned subscriptions, or having a subscription for the multifamily. The base product that you offer is a hardware, like I buy it and it's mine. So can you talk to me about what is locally controlled on the device? How y'all are kind of thinking about that from a longevity play in terms of supporting a connected product over time. And the reason why this feels super relevant is just this last week, Insteon, we don't actually know what happened there. We had known there was some issues for a while, and apparently a lot of people's cloud subscriptions and apps just stopped working, leaving them a little bit stranded. So I think it's on a lot of people's minds right now, like, oh my gosh, what's local, what's supported? How do you support yourself? These are big questions. You don't have to answer them all, but just kind of your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, my first thought on Insteon is that it seems bizarre, and I don't have any inside information there, and so I can't speak to the details of what happened there, and everyone seems equally confused. It seems extremely irresponsible and kind of unthinkable that a company would just sort of stop operating its servers without communicating anything. So I don't understand that, and I don't have any light to shed on it, because I just look at that and go, how is that possible? So I think, my first answer to that is just having a sense of responsibility to your users and behaving responsibly as a company seems like a very baseline starting point that you'd imagine they would be operating from, but seemingly they weren't operating under the same set of assumptions that the rest of us have there, and I don't know that there's any absolute insurance against a bad actor. So I'm confused. Maybe there's a story that'll come out that will clarify it. People have been able to find workarounds when they're committed to it, but it's just a very strange situation. So stepping aside from that, you want to first build a solid foundation for your company. That's a matter of securing the right backing, the right ecosystem of partners who are invested in your success. We're just talking about the Residio relationship, for example. Behaving responsibly within that community and making sure that everything you do is going to endure, because you're talking about people's homes. It's not it's not just a little doodad that you pick up, and if it breaks, it breaks. When you build something into the house, and this goes for all of these different product categories. I mean, it's not just Brilliant. It's anything that gets built into the walls of your house. It really becomes part of your house, and you need to think in those terms, long lifetimes. And then you make a set of technical decisions to try to ensure that as well. And we do local integrations with as many devices as we can. So if there is a local API available or a local way of talking to a device available, that's always the one that we will use, precisely because it doesn't have any delay associated with going out over the internet.
And will Matter help with that?
Yeah, this is an area where Matter should be able to help, because you will be able to talk locally over either Wi-Fi or the Zigbee radio or other radios in the future. And that's a nice feature, because the fact of the matter is a number of smart home devices out there today only offer a cloud API. That really is the only way that you can control them. So when that's the only way, then that's the way that we use. But our guiding principle is to always do the most local, highest reliability communication that's available.
Well, and the internet connectivity offers a lot of really high value adds, like, time and date servers that tell you when sunrise and sunset are, weather, all sorts of options. So, all right. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for coming on the show this week. I really appreciate you chatting with me.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed the conversation.
And that concludes this week's episode of the Internet of Things podcast. Please join us next Thursday, and don't forget to subscribe. And if you can't get enough IoT news, I would love for you to sign up at www.stacyoniot.com for our weekly IoT newsletter, where we explain all kinds of things that we don't even get to on the show. Once again, thank you for listening, and please subscribe.